Welcome, everyone. I'm Sue Barber, author, former IT director for a Fortune 500 company, turned executive coach, and this is the Visibility Factor podcast, where we explore how to raise your visibility and play bigger at work and in life. We'll explore key topics and welcome guests that help you shift your thinking about yourself so you can see new possibilities for your leadership. I'm on a mission to create a visibility movement for leaders to show their value and be seen for their true talent. Are you ready to take the next step towards a higher level of visibility for yourself? Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Visibility Factor podcast. This is Sue Barber, your host. I am beyond excited today to share with you my guest, Lori Benton. And Lori and I have known each other probably about 4 or 5 years now. She is an amazing leader who has a unique background that she will share with you in her own introduction in a second. But she is a senior vice president of learning, culture, and engagement, as well as being a leadership coach. So welcome to the show, Lori. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you. I don't know that I live up to the intro, but thank you.
I think you do. So share a little bit more about your background, though, beyond what I've shared here.
Well, I say I'm a purple unicorn in corporate America just because the job I have is very unusual and my background is a little different. And so I was actually a chemistry teacher and a coach at the high school level and loved teaching, always have loved teaching, whether it's tutoring or whatever. I joke I still tutor in chemistry for free, for fun. And I've not been in the classroom for a long time, but I worked into leadership at the ripe old age of 25, leading in the high school realm, leading adults and developing programs for students who were struggling and loved every minute of that. I worked my way into district administration, got a PhD in leadership, and ended up retiring as the chief academic officer for a school district. And I loved every moment of it. I was in public education for 22 years. And when this organization came calling, I had been thinking about a different opportunity. Opportunity was to develop learning programs for the organization focused on how we engage as leaders, how we engage as team members. The idea is pretty simple, right? If you invest in your team members, then they will invest in the organization, and it'll be a better experience for our members as well as our team members. And I do work for a credit union, so we call them members, not customers, because we're a financial cooperative. But what makes my background unique is that I took what I did in education and have been able to apply it into the corporate environment and do it very differently than traditional corporate America. And I've been given the opportunity to do it. We're an intentional strategy from our CEO, and I've loved it. 5 years in now, so you can kind of add up my age if you want. Decades in leadership, and I've learned a lot about what I don't know. And every year, I feel like that it gets bigger and bigger, right? All you don't know. But I do love people, and I love building programs, and I love supporting people in their career journeys. So that's the consistency between all of it. Anyway. So that's a little bit about me.
You and I know each other pretty well, so I've learned a lot about how that transition has been for you around development because you've come from a very different place into corporate. How has that changed your thinking or helped you maybe bring something special to the organization because of that experience?
One of the challenges when you work with kids, with students, is that you're constantly trying to meet the needs of the individual in front of you. And so checklists, process, they only work so much. And you have to come up with creative, intentional ways to support somebody in a pretty significant time in their life. And so one of the things I got to do was to develop alternative programming. And it forces you to rethink what traditional looks like traditional pathways of how a student should graduate, what they should look like. And getting to be directly involved in the outcome for a student and their family was very powerful, very emotional. And it taught me rethink what's possible, find other ways. And so that's the one thing that I've kind of drawn into this environment of learning and supporting culture and working on, employee engagement, is that every situation that you face, although we have similarities, they're all different. And so that's for me, I guess, when I go into the learning environment for adults, which I did a ton of adult programming as well in my old job, and professional learning at all levels. And I think my biggest superpower is to take each person as an individual and then figure out how to make sure that I'm attuned to that and to support them. And if I can't do it, I want to connect them with somebody that I think can. To me, that's the beauty of the continuity of the whole story, right? My whole story from the age of 21, working in a really difficult school where I learned people's stories and it made me want to make things better. So I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Yeah, no, it totally does. Because I was going to ask you, is there something that happened within your career that really kind of influenced you into how you lead and help others lead as you coach them today?
So I was fortunate enough to be in a master's program pretty early on, and I actually went with the intent to be a counselor. And so I have an emphasis in counseling and human services. And through that process in my early teens, I learned so much about people's experiences and the emotions and their perspectives and all the things tied to what they saw as their own obstacles or what they saw as their possibilities. And so for me, that was one of the most impactful. It was a turning point in my career because I I no longer looked at quote, promotion and growth in a career as something that was this self-driven thing. To me, it was like, hey, the more opportunity I'm given to impact humans, the more I want to learn about them, the more I want to support their own growth. And then to me, the rest of the growth around your career happens. I'm fortunate that my job has never been a revenue generating tied to sales, right? I am not a threat to our mortgage team in any way, shape, or form, right? I'm not stealing their business. Nobody's letting me originate a loan. Let's be clear. So I have a really cool opportunity to really get to know the human underneath, to learn the story, to try and connect the dots of their experiences to help them show up as their authentic selves and do amazing things. So that's my turning point is that, you know, that program allowed me to really uncover my own assumptions about people's motivations and what I perceived as their own emotional baggage or whatever it was, right?
Hmm.
And help me really get out of myself and sit with them in wherever they were at.
That's amazing. That's a pretty cool program. Do they know how much they helped you?
There was a professor that I got to connect with over about 10 years' time in that program. And, I do value relationships and I want people to know. I mean, Susan, I've talked with you about what you've taught
Mhm.
me in the journey. And yeah, I believe so. I believe that those professors knew and mentors along the way, right? Like people you find and you connect with have the same philosophy and they know too.
I mean, you can tell when people are invested and really are trying to do the best they can for themselves. So let's talk about your perspective or your philosophy around learning and culture, because I know that you've been working really hard to build that up at your credit union. And what has that experience been like for you from like where you started to where you are today?
Well, I try to take people I'm very altruistic, which Susan helped me uncover through my coaching opportunities and sessions. So she's pretty much a rock star there. And so I try to take people as that how they show up, right? Like who they are is who they say they are. And I think people try to show up and do a good job every day. And they try to work with colleagues. And sometimes they just don't have the tools and resources or experience, or they don't have an awareness of impact, right? They have a great intent, but the impact isn't landing the way that they want it. And so the way I look at the opportunities around learning and culture and how they align is we want to give people opportunities to either grow within their career or grow into wherever their career is headed next. And they have to learn whether it's technical, whether it's strategic thinking, enterprise wide mindset, pick all the leaders, pick whatever competency model you want. Ultimately, though, they have to learn. And if you can give them a safe environment, right? And that's the other thing. We talk about psychological safety, but if people can't be in a safe environment and they feel threatened in any way, shape, or form, they're not going to be able to learn. And so part of that is that culture of how do we invite people into a learning environment, make them feel safe, help them be vulnerable, whether it's personal reflection, impact of behavior, whatever it is. And I think a lot of people look at learning as training in corporate America. And training to me is not the same thing as learning. And so we have these consumption learning activities. You click through, you take an assessment, you check the box. That's not learning. And so to me, inviting them in, helping them craft their own journey, right? Helping them with an individualized development plan, giving them professional and personal attention to develop their own goals. And then that invites a culture of learning, which then hopefully perpetuates as leaders us doing the same thing for our teams. There's just an expectation when you walk into the department that, hey, we're going to be here for you. We're going to help you learn. We're going to help you grow. That's how I see it. I don't know how you untether them. I don't know how you have two things that are like culture and learning cannot be separate things.
I think it's very clear when you're walking into a new company and you can tell if there is an encouragement and psychological safety, and it starts to give you a indication of what your experience is going to be like. So I love that you're creating that. And I know that the organization is reaping some of the rewards for that. I know you guys just won an award, and I think that is really high praise for all of the work that you've been doing over the past few years.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a team effort. Lots of support and resources provided and a lot of opportunities that, leaders digging in and asking good questions about how they can provide that environment for their team, doing a lot of self-reflection on their part. So it's definitely, it was a team effort.
Everything is about the team for sure. Is there anything that you have seen or witnessed in your organization or maybe in conversations with others where a leader might get in the way of what you're trying to build in terms of culture?
Yeah, it happens. And I'm not always perfect in my response to it because it frustrates me. But we have, every organization has leaders who have come up through different training, right? And I say that where you are rewarded for certain behaviors and there's consequences for other behaviors. And especially when you have an environment where maybe you're competing for sales or competing for customer, whatever it is, and you end up pitting each other against one another. And so the culture or environment that is created is a competitive culture. But what we know from research is that a collaborative culture gets better business outcome. And so that's where I do struggle is if people see whatever initiative that we're trying to do as competitive against their time or against, whether we can meet the needs of a member or whatever it is, they see it as a competitive thing and counterintuitive to the systems and processes that they've been, quote, raised up in their leadership journey versus looking at it from a collaborative perspective. That if as a leader, we can take a step back and be reflective about the impact of our decisions, the impact of how we show up in meetings, everything from body language to how we put information in an email. I do think that that's probably where I struggle the most with leaders is when they look at it as fluff. They look at it as touchy feely. They look at it as, I don't have time for that. And I push back on that. And I basically use research to demonstrate that if you don't focus on the health and well-being of your team and the culture of your team and supporting people in their career growth, cool, you're just going to have to replace people. I mean, it's that cost benefit analysis, right? From a business bottom line. And so pick any organization that does research on organizational development, and they'll tell you that if you don't take the time to invest up front in your team, you're going to struggle. So I try really hard to attack it with data. Doesn't always work. And sometimes, hey, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I know that, right? I can rub people the wrong way. So sometimes it's not mine to defend. It's letting people see the results and letting them feel how it makes them feel and how it makes their teams feel and letting them decide.
One of the things that a lot of people struggle with is how do I connect the learning and the growth and development to business priorities and really helping people start to see the importance of why those things need to be there in order for the business priorities to really succeed.
Well, I think what's fascinating about people's perspective on the peopling part is that most of the time, businesses, in my opinion, have it backwards. They work on business strategy. They work on business outcome. They work on goals. They work on systems and all of those things. And they think that they can work on their culture strategy after they work on their business strategy. And there's research that shows that that only works to a certain extent. So if your business model is built on expertise of individuals, right, and collaboration, whether it's sales, service, pick your thing, it'll flatline if you don't invest in the culture. And by the culture, I mean, it's a combination of talent management, promotability, training support, whatever you want to call it, as well as the culture and environment that you set and establish, how we treat one another, right? The values that we aspire to, whether or not we meet with our teams regularly, that's all culture. And there's research that demonstrates business outcomes flatline if you don't invest in culture. And the rationale behind it is that you're constantly going to have to be hiring for that expertise because people aren't going to want to stay. I think it's interesting too. You think about generational differences, and whether we like it or not, there's stereotypes, and stereotypes have some sort of basic fact or whatever associated with it. And our folks under the age of 40 want to feel driven by purpose. And some of them are motivated, right, by money. Cool. Some are motivated by title. Cool. But if we don't reward what we expect out of our team members, which should be to treat each other well, to develop a solid culture, to have, the company's best interest in mind, which whatever that driving purpose is. I just think it's interesting that a lot of leaders miss the boat and think that it's all about business outcome. And if you want sustainability for an organization, if you want to be able to say, we've built a great legacy, let's perpetuate it, you got to work on your culture strategy, whether it's simultaneously or first, but you can't wait until after you think you've got your business strategy developed.
I love that you shared that because I think that is definitely how it usually happens, or it's kind of happening between groups in silos. So like JAR might have some role in the culture strategy, but let's just use IT since I'm kind of familiar with that one. IT is building their own business strategy. But what I do love about our IT is that they really did think about building leaders as part of it. And I think that's unique. Honestly, I never have seen too many IT leadership programs very focused on development of IT leaders and really thinking about them as business partners to the rest of the organization. And I think that changed the way that we saw ourselves when that happened. And so the more people can start to really kind of marry the things together, I think it's better for the organization, better for the business, better for the leaders, and they feel developed and they want to stay. I mean, and that's the goal.
Well, I love that you just shared that because our leadership asked me to put together a program, a cohort program for what we see as high potential tech leaders. And between that senior manager and senior director level, so you say that, and guess what? We're in the middle of doing that. We're in the middle of building our bench of our next lane of senior leaders. And it's not focused on technical acumen. It's focused on the people part. You can be good at the people and you can be good at the things, but if you're not good at both, you're not going to stay in an organization and help grow it. And that's what they're getting to have experience with. So it's been a lot of fun, actually. We just did a session. I just did a group coaching session with them on transition management, not change management, but transition management. So anyway, fascinating that you just said that.
Love.
It lined up.
I mean, I really didn't know that, everyone. So, yeah, if you need any help with that, you just let me know. I would be happy to share ideas of what we did. I thought it was such a great program. Okay, well, let's go into people a little bit more. So when someone is trying to get ready for the next step, what are some things that you've seen that helps prepare them for that next level, for future promotion opportunities?
I'm going to say something that might not be what everybody agrees with. I'll just put it out there. I think the fastest way to learn how to lead people, whether it's more people or more people with expertise or whatever it is to get outside of yourself. So many times we focus growth and development on the individual who wants to do the growing. And what they don't realize is that they can actually benefit from thinking outside of what their perceptions are, right? And really grow in their people mindset. So what drives people? How do you help people collaborate more effectively? How do you help team members understand impact from decisions? How do you as a leader communicate better so that the communication is actually received and understood? What coaching do you need to be more effective with your team? Not effective at necessarily business outcomes, because most people, again, are really good at the things. That's how they get promoted. I believe that the proof is in having a leader be more reflective on the impact of the decisions they make and how they treat others and think outside of themselves. Nobody can see your intent in your head, but they feel the impact of every interaction that you have. So talk less, listen more, get outside of your own head, learn from other people, ask good questions, be curious, stop making assumptions that you know everything. And understand that the farther you go in your leadership journey, the less you actually know. That's how I see it. I mean, I've learned from my mistakes more than I've learned from my successes.
Yeah, I just said that to someone yesterday. The things that you did not perform well on are the things that really stuck with you and that you learned from. And those are the things I share with other people because I think a lot of people see the perfection side of others and that they do everything right. And they don't get to always see that we don't have it all figured out, right? It's just you don't come out of the box with every leadership competency and skill that you need. You have to go through the problems and the challenges in order to gain those skills. And you're so much better because of it. So,
Absolutely. Well, there's no such thing as perfect, right?
no, it's an illusion, as I've been told.
It is. I always say perfection gets in the way of excellence.
Yes. I didn't know that for a long time. And so I stuck with that perfection for far longer than I should have. But I'm so glad to have learned, thanks to Brene Brown, learned a lot about
Right.
perfection.
Right.
So let's talk about when you think about leaders who are leading other people, leading teams. What are some of the challenges that you've seen them face? And what have you done successfully to help them move past that and really become great leaders?
Well, I believe that every individual has stuff in them to help them be successful. Our job as leaders is to help them figure out how to tap into that brilliance and figure out where we can support them. And so for leaders learning to lead teams or leaders who are now leading other leaders who lead teams, I think one of the most difficult things for people to learn is that we talk about change management, and I talked a little bit about why I did a coaching on transition management. We talk about change management as it's something we can quote manage. Well, we can't manage the change typically, especially at many of the levels we're talking about, right? Like when you're responsible for leading teams. What we can do though is that we can help support our team members through transitioning from what was, being able to say goodbye to it, and helping craft what will be. And it involves a lot of emotion management too. But leaders work more on the plan for implementing the change than they do on necessarily helping their team members support and go through that transition time frame. William Bridges talks about the neutral zone, right? A lot of texts refer back to that. And that neutral zone is where we have like the icky phase, but it also is where innovation is. And so leaders need to support innovation and innovative thought and rethinking things. That would be what I would suggest as they're looking at their leadership journey and how to support their teams.
What have you seen in terms of high performing leaders who really want to do the next thing but have struggled?
Well, we do have several programs and several classes that we put together. One is how to speak with confidence. And I think that that's something a lot of people push aside. They don't know how to have an impact in a room. They will defer to the person with the higher title, even if the person with the higher title doesn't have the expertise that they have. And so we coach people on how do you put the right voice in the room, right? So it's not, they don't need to know everything. It's not the minutia, but they do need to be seen as the expert. And so not apologizing for putting their voice in the room and understanding that if they got invited to the table, that there's purpose there. Leveraging influence and teaching people how to leverage influence is not about manipulation, but it should be about what's additive, right? So if I come to the table as a leader and my team is owning something and they're doing well, celebrate that success publicly. Honor and recognize the work. Make sure they feel celebrated for it. That's another way that you can leverage influence because it's that grassroots effort of we don't need to have fancy awards. We need people to feel valued for the work they do. And guess what? That spreads like wildfire. By the way, that's culture. That's how we, right? Just to tie it all back. We do try to coach leaders on how to have confidence, how to demonstrate their success to their boss, right? Their upline. Having those conversations of what they've accomplished. We talk about measuring goals and not just business outcomes, but all the other things. IDP, right? Writing an IDP, helping track that, helping be reflective about the growth. And if you're not telling somebody all the cool stuff you're doing, how can they know? How can they celebrate that success? They just think you're good at stuff. Well, help them understand what specifically you're good at and areas where you can grow. So I think it's about leveraging your own influence, but not being afraid to be the expert in the room. And Susan, I know you talk about that visibility piece and that appropriate level of visibility and not to apologize for what you're good at, right?
Yeah. Not to hide it. Some people hide it.
I know. One of the things I like to do too is I like to look for what people can teach others, and then I invite them to. So we do some of these executive learning sessions and invite people in to talk about, well, what is liquidity and how do you what is treasury management and stuff that a lot of people, it sounds very complicated, but why does it matter to them as a leader and how do they help their team understand how we all play a role in that? Well, guess what? That just increased visibility for that leader that I asked to share that
Yeah.
information, right? So yeah, I mean, there's so many ways we can do it. Our programs definitely help. We do have manager training programs that aren't your typical programs. Again, I don't do the technical training part for a leader. By that point, they've got to figure out their own technical acumen. But we do a lot of the professional leadership development.
I think everybody needs to be thinking about that in their own organizations. And if they don't have things like that, that there is a cost, right? You talked about, the cost of not retaining someone, and then you have to pay the next set of interview costs and all of those things. Hit the bottom line at some point, right? So you do have to be thinking about the bigger picture.
Well, I think one of the things that businesses miss is that when somebody leaves, let's say they've been there 5 years and they've worked on something and they know the ins and outs of it, and then they move on. You can't replace somebody with that exact same job role. We think we can. We think we can hire for that. But you're hiring honestly for somebody who's starting back at that beginning mark. They might have some technical acumen, but they don't know the teams. They don't know the processes. They don't know the organization. And so this assumption that we're going to replace somebody that at a particular level so easily is false.
Hmm.
And so you as a leader are then having to figure out, well, how do I pull that talent from other places? And that's a lot of energy that we could have just put into investing in the person that we want to demonstrate has value,
Right.
right? Instead of just accepting the fact that, well, people move on. That's just how it is. Like, well, I mean, if they're not happy here, well, it's not about happy. It's about engaged, right?
And I think it depends where you grew up in an organization, what you learned from others, what others valued. And if you adopt what they have adopted in their past, you hold on to that. Listening to some of the things Lori's sharing, in my experience, makes such a difference in an organization because it can grow. It has so much more innovation, more creativity because you're investing in people, right? And that's what helps an organization continue to challenge the status quo, continue to change and evolve and transform in the ways that they really want to help support the business. So I see them as all connected as well. So I'm really glad that you shared that.
Yeah. Well, and business strategy and culture strategy are aligned. If they're not, you can't evolve. And if you can't evolve, you know how they say, if you can't evolve, you die. And it might be a slow, painful, agonizing death, but as a company, it's just you got to work on your human capital.
So true. So has anything changed for you since you became a certified coach?
Gosh. Well, it was a great program. I will say just going through the whole, ACC certification process it's really amazing. It gives me such a different perspective when people have some of those letters after their name, what they went through, right? I will say that I love getting to partner with people in their journey. And this just validated that. I have no answers usually. They have them within. One of the best things I got out of the program, honestly, is that I believe the people that I get to coach are creative, resourceful, and whole as individuals. And if they show up and want to be reflective about their practice, man, they can just having that sounding board, right? Or that partner to challenge their thinking or ask them questions and dig deeper underneath the things that they think are the things, but they're actually the things underneath the things is just so fun. And I think I've learned so much getting to know other people and what they do and why they do what they do, right? And I love it. So it just allows me to do some of the things that I've really enjoyed. It also gave me the idea of how do we support coaching programs in corporate environment. And I think one of the disconnects I had coming in is how people use and define the word coaching.
Hmm.
And that many times it's seen as a punitive thing.
Yes.
And so you'll hear, well, they just need coached on that. And it's like, well, I think what you're trying to do is tell them how to do it, which is actually performance management or mentorship, right? And not coaching. Coaching should be a collaborative conversation where they uncover what they need to do to move forward. So that's one disconnect I see in corporate America is this negative concept of, well, they need coaching. Well, don't we all? You know?
Yes. We all do. Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. I think that's because that's where coaching kind of got started in companies was they're not doing well. Can we save them? And many times people will come to me and say, could you coach them? And I say, tell me the situation. Because if you're just trying to get me to tell you that, they're not ready for the next step or whatever, that's not really what I'm in for, right? I'm in to help them grow and develop. And, do you see a future in them? Are you willing to invest in them? And it's a really interesting conversation because I don't think that they understand either, just like you just explained, that it's coming from a much more positive place, right? We can't always look at it from a negative place. And unfortunately, that's where it started. And so there's a lot of people in the coaching industry who actually wish it was called something else because it still has this negative connotation around the word coaching. There's so many things, so many people can change and shift and grow. And it's an honor to be a part of that. Honestly, I feel like for me, and I love to see how they can just, they're like ready to fly. They're ready to fly out of the nest, right? And they just want to do great things. And now they believe that they can do it. And
Yeah,
before they didn't.
no, I agree. I think one of the benefits of being in a different career field, especially I would say public education that's underfunded, undersupported, and not understood. I think what I found most fascinating is that coaching as a whole is innately built into public education when schools are humming along and kids feel like they can come to school and learn. Coaching is just built in. We do coaching cross collaboratively with teams, we do it across grade levels, we do it with administrators, we do it naturally. It's an additive welcomed process about getting better for the sake of learning. And yet that didn't translate for me here. It was like, okay,
Mm.
well, coaching is you need to get better. Well, what's better? And yes, if there's issues, do the performance management route. Cool. Support other ways. But if you want them to be more reflective and you want somebody to be able to have a positive impact, coaching's a great place to understand, where you make decisions, why you make decisions, who you are, your values, how your values align to how you make decisions, and whether or not those values align with the organization, right? And they get to help uncover that. But yeah, that's very different to me and that's one of those things that I had to get used to. So when I quote sell coaching to people, right? Air quotes, I talk about that it's about self-guided improvement and I'm along with the tools and kind of that tool backpack and along right side by side for the journey.
Love that. So, if you could leave leaders with maybe one mindset shift or anything else around learning and development or helping their teams grow, is there anything you would share? Anything else?
There's so many thoughts running in my head right now because again, I think I learned a lot the hard way or the wrong way. But I think to come at things from curiosity, ask questions. Stop making assumptions. We as leaders have so much to do, right? So much on our plates. And we rely on those, I call them the mental ruts that have gotten us where we're at, right? Where our brain processes information so quickly. And so we've been in this situation before. It's the exact same thing. Let's just do this. And the reality is it's not because the people are different. And
Hmm.
so take the time to step back and figure out how to support your team. I mean, that's the honestly, and I guess the other thing is stop thinking about you all the time. Like it's not about you. If you get into leadership and you think it's all about you, then you really want promotion and title for the sake of yourself, and that's cool if that's your driver. I I struggle with that, and I want people to know that if you want to be a leader, not a manager, then figure out how to invest in your team. Know your own blind spots. Know how your behavior impacts your team. Try to show up every day and do better. I had a mentor tell me that. All I ask is that you show up every day and try to do better. I don't ask that you're perfect. But if you're going to show up and do better, you got to be reflective. And you better model that for your team.
Brilliant stuff. We're going to transition into the 4 questions that I ask every guest. So, I can't wait to hear your answers. So, what do you view visibility to be, and why did you answer that way?
So, visibility to me is about, and again, showing up, doing your best work, letting your work speak for itself. Nobody likes somebody who walks around and bangs their own gong. I do think, though, that visibility also shows up in your team. And so, visibility as a leader is about being available for your team, about being available for your colleagues. And I I guess the way I look at it is that the impact of your work and the impact of your leadership should show up in others.
Well, that's brilliant. What are you doing to be visible?
I can always get better at this. The difficulty sometimes is the larger your team gets, the harder it is to have that level of impact, and to be able to support people in their growth, right? And in those outcomes. I went to a conference a long time ago and they talked about the value of a stay interview and rather than an exit interview, right? And so rather than asking somebody what happened and try to fix it for someone else, how do you find the value of what somebody thinks they bring to the table and the things that are missing? And so one of the questions I ask, and I meet with every team member I have all the way through my downline once a year at least. And I will ask them, what am I missing? What's something that you think that I could do to help support you or the team? What's something that you think I'm not aware of? Because I can't be everywhere, right? And I can't do their jobs anymore. I can't. And so those stay interviews give me so much. Well, one, it gives me face time with them and I get to hear what they're passionate about. I get to hear how they're growing and how I can support that. But I also get to hear their pain points, their friction points. I ask them, you can ask me anything. I'm an open book. And if I can answer it, I will. And to me, that's another way to be visible, right? Is that you're visible you're as transparent as you can possibly be with the information you have. And that builds trust. And so I tell them if feel free to Teams me, shoot me an email, ask me a question. Those to me are important moments because our team feels invested in. And so to me, that's how I try to stay visible is by letting them hear. I mean, I walk the floor. I have meetings, I do the things, but not everybody's at their cube, right? Sometimes I work from home. So visibility is not necessarily physical presence either. So I think part of visibility is they need to be seen.
Yeah. Love that. Okay. You mentioned some advice already, so it may be the same, but what is your best leadership or career advice you've received?
I didn't mention this because this is hard for me. I have to remind myself of this advice all the time. I had a boss a long time ago tell me, I was in his office ranting about something that I thought wasn't right. And he said, just because you're right doesn't mean you're effective.
Oh,
I know, right? Powerful. The mic drop. Boom, right? And it's so true, right? So we all think we're coming from this place where we're right. And yet again, that intent and impact part of us is my intent is to help people understand that I'm right. And the impact is ineffective. And then people close off, right? And so I think there's opportunities for me every day to figure out, am I effective? And then it makes you reflect, well, am I right? Right. So
yeah.
I don't know. That's my best piece of advice. It's simple, which I need. I need simple. I need tangible. So yeah, that's my best piece of advice.
That's amazing. That's great advice. What is a book you would recommend to the audience?
I love books. And people laugh. They're like, you should listen to this on blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I like the tactile nature and feature of it. I will give you one that I love. And it's a picture book, literally a picture book by Simon Sinek. And it's called Together is Better. There's even a page in here that it smells like optimism. It's scratch and sniff. I know it sounds hysterical, but what I love about this is it's a story about possibility for a team. And actually it's a team of kids, which is great. It's a call to leadership that looks very different than what you would consistently consider leadership. And the best part of the story is that if you have an opportunity to do something innovative, creative, stretch yourself, go outside your comfort zone, don't just settle for that. Invite others into that journey. And I know it sounds simple, but it really embraces your passion. It's a cool book. And so I actually bought this book for all my leaders and we did a book study on literally a very interesting quote picture book. So everybody asks me, what's a great book? I say this. And I laughed because we were doing meet and greet or whatever, just a conversation with our CEO and me. And I talked about this book and I think he laughed at me. And then I gave it to him. I gave him one because I was like, it actually has a page that smells like optimism. We should all pull that out and smell it every once in a while. But yeah, I have a whole bookshelf and books at home and I like to read and learn. But yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Well, thanks for recommending that book. I have not heard of that. I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan, but I didn't realize about that one. So definitely we'll add it to the show notes so everybody can check it out. If people want to reach out to you or connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I wish I could tell you I'm great on LinkedIn. And as Susan knows, I'm not. But feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. But also, I'm an open book, so, I think there's contact information in there too.
Yep.
Feel free to reach out.
Yeah.
Happy to help. I love to talk about learning and learn from other people. So, I don't know that I'm any wiser than anybody else along their journey. I've been doing it a long time, and I think that might be the difference. It's just a little
Hmm.
bit more weathered is a good way to put it.
You've seen a lot, experienced a lot of things for sure.
Yeah, that's very true. But
Oh my gosh. Well, thanks for being here. Was so excited to have you on because I know you and just think you're amazing as a leader. Your perspective around learning is not everyone else's. And I do want you to recognize that because I think it's unique. I think the credit union is extremely lucky to have you and to have seen the things that you have been able to implement over the last few years is really making a difference for your teams, for the leaders in the teams. And I think it's going to continue to help the credit union, just grow and do great things. So I'm thrilled to know you and I'm just so excited to see what comes next for you.
well, thank you. I appreciate you inviting me to be on this. I also just want to say thanks to the folks who brought me in to do this and allowed me to do it differently and encouraged me to do it differently. And so I have a phenomenal boss. And again, leadership makes a huge difference. And so I
It
just
does.
shout out to my upline who is a rock star.
Yes, amazing. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you got some great tidbits out of this conversation today, and I will put things in the show notes for you to check them out. And thanks for joining today on the Visibility Factor podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks so much for listening to the Visibility Factor podcast. Remember that visibility starts with small steps that are intentional and consistent each day. Be bold, be visible, be the leader you were meant to be. Find us and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Follow us on all of our social media platforms, which are highlighted in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Visibility Factor podcast.